Good evening, everyone. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I would like to take a moment on behalf of the board to recognize two losses within our school communities. It is with great sadness that we share that student Luca Bance passed away unexpectedly on August 6th due to a medical condition. Luca was a member of last year's 8th grade class at North Central Middle School and was preparing to begin his freshman year at Liberty High School this fall. Luca will be remembered for his kind heart, fun-loving spirit, and the positive impact he had on those around him. He carried a genuine light with him that people noticed wherever he went. Teachers, coaches, friends, and parents often commented on how naturally he connected with others and how easy he was to talk to. He had a special gift for starting conversations, making people feel comfortable, and helping those around him feel welcome. His warmth, kindness, and fun-loving spirit left a lasting impression on everyone fortunate enough to know him, and his loss will be deeply felt by his family, friends, classmates, teachers, and the entire school community. On behalf of the Iowa City Community School District and the Board of Education, we extend our deepest condolences to Luca's family and loved ones during this incredibly difficult time. Additionally, Sally Staley was a lifelong Iowa City resident, a graduate of Iowa City High School, and a passionate advocate for education. She served on the Iowa City Community School District Board of Education from 1990 to 1996, dedicating 6 years to our schools and community. Sally's commitment to education continued long after her service on the board. When she left the board, she donated the remaining funds from her campaign account to establish the very first gift of what would become the endowment for the foundation for the Iowa City Community School District. That modest gift was the seed of something much larger. It helped launch a tradition of community investment in our schools that continues today through the foundation's endowment and its support for students, teachers, and extraordinary learning experiences. Sally and her husband, John, also established the Staley Endowment Fund in honor of their son, Robert, providing ongoing support for visual arts education at West High School. That gift allows students to learn from professional artists and for decades has enhanced the arts program at West. Sally believed deeply in education, in the arts, and in the importance of investing in our schools and students. Her generosity and vision continue to have a very real impact on students in our district. On behalf of the Iowa City Community School District and Board of Education, we extend our deepest condolences to Sally's sons, Kenneth and Thomas, and her sister Trish, and the rest of her extended family and friends. I would like to invite everyone at this time to join us in a moment of silence in honor of Luca Bance and Sally Staley, and in support of all those who are grieving their loss. Thank you. I will now call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Directors for August 11th, 2026. Thank you to those attending our meeting in person, joining us by Zoom, and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the back of the boardroom on the table to my left and turn it in to Secretary Coven, seated at the end of the board table, also on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. And before we get to tonight's agenda, I'll take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, we have Interim Superintendent Kortmeyer, Directors Horn Fraser, Eastham, and Williams. And to my left, we have Vice President Abraham, Director Finch, and Board Secretary Colvin. And with that, we will get to our first item of the agenda, and that is approval of tonight's agenda.
President Malone, I move approval of the agenda for August 11th.
Second.
Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, President Malone. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up, we will have the ICEA update from President Kelly.
Good evening, President Malone, members of the school board, and Interim Superintendent Kortmeyer, and everyone joining us tonight. As we begin another school year, I had the privilege today to get to, along with many other members of our ICEA Executive Board, to welcome under 40 new teachers to our district for our new teacher orientation that happened today. Some are joining us from districts where, while many others are beginning their teaching careers for the very first time. Sitting with those new educators brought me back to when I was sitting in their spot, beginning my own career in this district 23 years ago, if you can believe that. You could see the excitement and the passion they have for the work ahead, and most importantly, for the students who will soon walk into their classrooms. And I shared with them that I am excited as well to see my students and get my room ready. It was a powerful reminder that whether someone is beginning their career, their first year, or their 20th, educators come into this work because they believe in their students and they want to make a difference in their lives. Seeing that commitment firsthand was a great reminder of the incredible educators we have serving students across our district. ICA also recently held our annual Executive Board retreat. Our Executive Board, along with our committee chairs, came together to talk about our priorities and our goals for the year ahead, and how ICA can best support all of you and our members, our school district, our students, and our community. It was a great opportunity for our leadership team to spend time together, listen to one another, and make sure that we are beginning the year with a shared vision for the work ahead. And as we begin the new school year, I look forward to continuing to work together, keeping open lines of communication, and making sure the voices of our educators remain part of the conversations and decisions that impact our schools and our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comments directed at non-agenda and agenda items will take place at the beginning of the meeting and will be limited to 4 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes for speakers who has the assistance of an interpreter. Speakers' time limit will be displayed on the iPad on the ledge in front of Secretary Ms. Colvin, and an alarm will sound once the speaker's time has expired. The initial community comment period will be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, will take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during public comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by the stated rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and/or referred to law enforcement. And our first speaker of tonight will be Michael Parrott.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Parrott. I live in Coralville and I'm a West High graduate. Tonight, I support the proposed warrant. It's a good recommendation from PFM. One of my mentors used to say to me, don't call it a problem if you don't have a solution. So therefore, tonight I've got 3 observations for you and 3 proposed solutions for each one. First is that interfund borrowing is not going to be able to be stopped. It's going to be very difficult to stop until the district rebuilds its reserves. Every option in front of you tonight exists because we did not monitor and enforce our reserve targets for years. Thin reserves are why a $10 million payroll loan came out of health insurance. It's also why we're talking about borrowing to cover payroll in September this year. If you look back to 2023, when Moody's issued a negative credit outlook for the district on June 14th, they said, "The negative outlook reflects the district's trend of declining fund balance and cash. If reserves do not begin to meaningfully improve, the rating will likely move downward." So this brings me to our first solution. Ask the administration to bring a written reserve target to the board by the September meeting. It should state a minimum target expressed in days of operating cash, meaning how long we could pay our bills if revenue stopped coming in, and there should be a multi-year schedule to achieve it. Update Board Policy 701.5R1 to include this reserve metric, and also update the same policy to put our solvency target at a 10% minimum, not 5%. Second, if you look at the PFM materials, I believe they contain major risks, some of which are understated. Exhibit 2 shows 4 months of the year in which we start the month with less cash in the bank than we have expenses due that month. If any timing goes wrong, that would be a problem. The district's effectively living paycheck to paycheck for a third of the year. If you look at the other general expenses line item in the projection, you'll notice the numbers match exactly the actuals from last year, offset by $199,000. It's effectively a $30 million placeholder in your own forecast. If you look at Exhibit 2, it's also missing $6.1 million of expected loans coming from the general fund to save in May of 2027. If you were to include it, the days of cash at year end falls to 16 days of cash at the end of fiscal year 2027. We started the year for reference at $26 million, or about 39 days. So we're losing about 2/3 of our cash cushion by the end of the year in the current forecast. So my second solution, ask PFM if the warrant was sized based off the downside case of risk, or if it was sized to what a bank is willing to issue to the district. Update Exhibit 2 in their presentation and create a downside forecast in the exhibit that shows and outlines the number of days of cash that we'd have in each of those scenarios. Also, when you're considering the warrant, make sure that you've considered the fully loaded cost of the warrant, which includes issuance cost. So getting the warrant is not cost-free. And also include a forecast of the interest to be paid based off expected usage, because certainly we will use it over the course of the year. Keep in mind, short-term lending isn't free money. It might cost more than the HR staff decision that was discussed last week. My third observation, fiscal 2027 shows a $3.9 million deficit in the general fund. If you set aside all the borrowing and transfers and look at just money coming in and out of the door, and you add it up, you'll notice that there's $224 million of revenue and $228 million of costs. That's a $4 million decline in the general fund throughout the year. This is after doing a $7.5 million of painful cuts. So my solution for this is when you're considering a multi-year budget, make sure that you have a budget surplus every year until we reach our budget surplus, our budget needs and targets. This will get us back to reasonable levels so we can stop playing musical chairs with our funds where we're putting teacher payroll and health insurance funds at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Emily Campbell.
My name is Emily Campbell. I have 2 children in the district. For the past 20 years, I've worked in financial leadership, where human resources has been one of my most important partners in ensuring financial success. The HR leader and I work together daily on hiring, payroll, personnel, budgeting, and systems. This level of communication and collaboration between finance and HR is critical. As we know, our most important asset and our largest expense is our people. Based on the discussion at the last board meeting, I'm concerned about the board majority's lack of understanding of the role HR plays in financial health and the board's understanding of its current role in rebuilding a competent and qualified administrative team. In that discussion, multiple board members said, "We are overstepping our role as a board in guiding hiring decisions. Our role is to trust in the judgment of the leadership team." The former HR director did not attend a single board meeting between April 14th and his last day on June 30th. At the June 23rd board meeting, when you directed the hiring of an HR consultant, the only leaders present were the superintendent, who had stepped down, and the brand new CFO. You didn't have a leadership team in which to place your trust when you made that decision. In the last meeting, board members said that building administrators are upset about bringing in an HR consultant. The cost is high, and central administration should make do with what they have. They have a right to be upset. But comparing the cost of a temporary HR expert to a new teacher is a misleading comparison. Poor operational and governance decisions over the past 3 years created the needs for emergency measures like hiring consultants. The district needs someone with professional expertise to immediately address HR problems contributing to this financial crisis. This investment protects teachers who are already paying the price for administrative failures. Here's a more appropriate comparison. The district incurred $525,000 in tax penalties and $600,000 in interest on an interfund loan, a combined $1.1 million in penalties and interest that could have funded 11 teachers for an entire year. Stronger HR systems led by a trained, qualified, and seasoned director could have helped prevent these and other costs. How? Appropriate hiring systems preventing hiring an IT director with no financial qualifications as a CFO. Performance review systems ensure supervisors are appropriately evaluating their direct reports and addressing performance issues. This includes requiring comprehensive performance reviews for the administrative team. Employee feedback systems and following up on red flags gives leadership information they may not otherwise receive. Comprehensive hiring plans aligned with a realistic budget support sound hiring decision with limited resources. As the SBRC noted, basic HR position management systems can help prevent expenditure overruns like last year's 9% overrun. All of these are HR responsibilities. They're not supervisor responsibilities. They are not CFO responsibilities. They are not solely business office responsibilities, but human resources responsibilities. The board ultimately made the right call in following Superintendent Kortemeyer's advice to move forward with a temporary HR position open to external candidates while the organizational study informs the district's long-term administrative needs. I ask the board to recognize and accept the critical role you have in ensuring that the district has excellent operational leaders to manage its resources effectively and address its immediate operational needs. Without that leadership, our teachers and our students will not have the resources they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Maka Pilcher-Hyatt.
Hello, I'm Maka Pilcher-Hayek. I live in Iowa City. I have a graduate of City High and 2 kids still at City High, and I formerly sat on the school board. I came to the last board meeting with a positive outlook. In 6 months, interim CFO Kim Michael Lee did a great job. We have confidence in our new CFO, Pat Moore, and Kurt Pratt, and the rest of her team, and also feel great about the Financial Oversight Committee and their their professional qualifications. Again, most of us came to the last meeting thinking it was finally time to turn the page. Unfortunately, things took an embarrassing turn when 5 board members reversed their position on the district's need for an interim HR director. With suspicious consistency, Malone, Abraham, Williams, Horn-Fraser, and Eastham, one after the other, parroted essentially the same change of heart language about the district's need for the temporary position. Several of you, who should be familiar with the critical operational role of HR, pretended not to understand its significance, effectively dismissing the importance of having basic management of a workforce of approximately 2,500 employees. Instead, it was recommended that we hire someone from within because 19 principals allegedly told you to, and because it would save the district money. These misplaced justifications alone are evidence that we desperately need an interim HR director. The board majority still doesn't seem to recognize that this financial crisis was not caused by a single person. It was systemic. As you have been told repeatedly by administrative, governance, and operational experts, District leadership, including operational teams, and board leadership contributed to the district's financial crisis. Fortunately, and as usual, Finch and Lingo exposed the unreasonableness of the majority's position about the HR post. And equally important, Superintendent Amy Kortemeyer did what our previous administrators could not. She disagreed with the board majority and advised the board to post the HR position. Board leadership matters. Under current leadership, we still have a group of 5 who fail to appreciate that the public no longer trusts them, especially when they come to a meeting singing the exact same ill-advised tune. To those 5, please see who your leaders are, if not by title, by their actions. Finch and Lingo played a huge role in uncovering the crisis and helping this district find its way out. The public and the rest of this board owes them a debt of gratitude for their continued leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is our consent agenda, but before we get to that, are there any items, before we get to that, did directors have any questions regarding the bills that were reviewed this cycle? Hearing none, are there any items that directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda? Okay. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda for tonight.
Second.
Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to committee report, which is our Financial Oversight Committee. I was in attendance as the board member, and the meeting was very informative. IASB came in and did an overview presentation of the various financial funds and how those funds feed into the different categories that the district spends from. The presentation is uploaded on the Financial Oversight Committee agenda, so I would recommend people take an opportunity to look through that. The recording will be available probably sometime early next week because it was a lot of information that will need to be uploaded. Well, actually, that's not that's just the recording.
This week,
Okay. The committee was able to elect a chair and a vice chair. The chair will be Charlie Funk, and the vice chair is Simon Andrew. The committee acknowledged that there is quite a bit of work that they need to get their arms around and want to be as responsive and helpful as quickly as possible. So Chair Funk and Vice Chair Andrew will be meeting with CFO Moore in order to set some meetings going forward. So they're probably more frequent than a recommended 6 times a year. And that was pretty much it. We went over the ISB financial configuration, and as a board, we'll get to hear that again, some of it, on the 19th. So that takes us to our policy review, and Director Horn-Frazier will be giving that overview of the policies.
Okay, so what we have on the agenda tonight are policies that had their first reading on July 28th. And so tonight's the second reading and action. To review, policy 503.01, student conduct, defines the removal of students from the classroom. And then the next 3 are new that were developed as a result of legislative action from the last session. 503.11, disruptive behavior, requires districts to establish an oversight committee responsible for developing a policy governing the readmission of students after removal from a classroom. This sample policy language provides a framework based on the legal requirements outlined in SF 2428. The next one related to that, 503.11R1, disruptive behavior regulation, establishes procedures that districts must follow when responding to certain defined student behaviors, including multiple nonviolent disruptions, violent disruptions, and repeated removals for violent disruptions. And so this sample outlines the legally required steps and the district's considerations there. The next new one, as a result of the legislation, is 503.11R2, disruptive behavior regulation for students with an IEP. And this covers the special provisions for those students. And then finally, 603.03 special education clarifies, as a result of, again, the new legislation, that certain school employees have access to a student's IEP as necessary to support its implementation, and outlines employees' responsibilities regarding the use of and compliance with the IEP's requirements. So, I guess the next question is if there's any question or comment.
President Malone and Director Horn Fraser, just want to make a point, I think, that while these specific provisions, new policy provisions, are directed and mostly apply to, or to try to change the way that students who engage in disruptive behavior, violent behavior, are handled by the district, or how we relate to those students after those incidences. I would also point out to and I think board members understand this, and I hope we can convince teachers and students that while these provisions may have some effect that in protecting teachers from student violent behavior, they don't affect our approach to providing resources and teaching, actually, for students that do conduct themselves in some violent or disruptive way from time to time. That is, while these are new provisions that are punitive in nature, in my view, that we still have our existing approach to students which are restorative in nature, and which I think we will continue. And I hope we can convey that to this public, to students, and to the staff.
Thank you.
Thanks for raising those concerns, Director Eastham. I have similar concerns, and so there are a few other things I wanted to add to that. You mentioned that this policy is for protecting teachers, and that is true, but I also don't want to discount the fact that it is also to protect other students as and their learning time. Because when there's a disruption, then time is taken away from learning for all of the students. And so, we want classrooms where students are learning, and we also want classrooms where students aren't taken out and not learning. So I would like to understand more about what interventions will take place to ensure that the students are not missing out on learning. I know that's a provision in the policy, but I'm not really sure how that's actually going to play out, and what sort of additional behavioral or skills training that we are going to be helping these students to prevent them from having, more than one, where, when we get to the second one, that's when we have to have the meeting and all of that, and more serious consequences. I'm curious about the committees at the attendance centers, when those will be up and running. And wondering when the board can get some data on how this is playing out in our classrooms. You know, I assume we'll have it at the APR, but that is probably not until February. So maybe if we could get some data on what is actually happening as a result of these new policies, you know, sort of maybe at the end of the first trimester. And then just one other thing, and this is just really nitpicky, but the 503.11R2, I think we need to add the word guardians in addition to parents, and that's just my nitpicky nature, though. But yeah, yeah, if you want to comment on some of that, yeah.
I would like to. First of all, I'd like to thank you for those questions. And I want to give a nod out to Laura Cottrell and Lindsay Schwartzendruber, Kate Callahan for their work on this. The team's been hard at work putting together, first of all, of course, understanding the legislation itself, understanding what the policies that have been brought forth look like, and trying to answer as many questions amongst themselves and reaching out to legal as well. So we've been able to attend some additional trainings since our last policy and governance meeting where we brought these policies to you the first time. A couple of things have happened. The Department of Ed has put out additional guidance, which I think is going to be helpful for school districts. And just today, IASB, in response to the DE guidance, has issued again another set of policies related to this. So as I was contemplating over the course of the day, do we just table these policies for now and look at the latest rendition of them? I really think that let's get these on the books. We know that the law has significantly changed. We will bring the next set or the updated IASB recommendations to the policy and governance again. But by and large, you know, what's written in the policies right now are law, and we're working. We spent probably a good 45 minutes this afternoon with our administrative counsel on the updated changes. Tomorrow, they'll have more in-depth look at that. And then from there, we're getting ready to roll out to our larger staff, you know, the impact of this. So I do believe it's important for us to continue to work towards it. The absolute implementation, you know, it became law on July 1. The other thing, you had asked really fair questions about, can we bring back, you know, how it's going, what does our data look like? We absolutely can do that and should do that for the board. You know, what I'd want to think about is that better delivered in a work session where you can hear a presentation and ask questions more freely? Because I think it could be a rather lengthy conversation. I'm not opposed to doing it at the board table either, but it's definitely something I think it will take some time to get our arms around and work through those pieces. And I think anytime you're working with a school district that has multiple attendance centers, sometimes legislation doesn't feel like it gets written for communities like ours, right? And a behavior oversight committee and within a school building is one thing, but when you have 28 attendance centers, we certainly don't want them operating, you know, unlike one another either. So those are all things that we're still working through and need to have up and running as soon as possible. So thank you for those questions.
Do you anticipate bringing those updated policies to the August P&G? August? Okay.
Yes.
Any additional comments or questions regarding the policies? Okay, hearing none, that takes us to our discussion items. And the first one is the district cash flow update and need for anticipatory warrants. And it looks like Suzanne has made it. Welcome, and glad you were able to make it.
Yes. It was a nail biter. I was a little stressed out when we were just camped, and it was like, my husband drives. He's retired and drives me, so he was like, "It'll be okay. We'll get there. No cornfields." Okay. So this is an update for where we are year to date, ending fiscal 26, and where we are year to date, and sort of an update for the monthly cash flows for the general fund and PFM's recommendation for proceeding with a taxable anticipatory warrant. So we will review the general fund monthly cash flow updates for fiscal 26 and for fiscal 27, do a brief interfund loan update, and then go through PFM's recommendations and the tax bill anticipatory warrant, and talk about the process and the timeline and the next steps that would be needed should the board decide to go forward. First, some good news. Fiscal through July 2026. We're not through the full accrual period yet. That'll go through August, but district staff estimates ending fiscal 26 with $26.3 million. That is approximately $5 million better than the last update that PFM provided in April. Variances include revenues were just modestly down $650,000, but expenditures were reduced $5.6 million, which produced that net better overall cash flow. So positive cash flow variance, $4.952 million of free cash flow going into July 1st. And so this is what that monthly cash flow is. A reminder, we started fiscal 26 with $19.3 million. Interfund loan from the insurance fund into the general fund in August, and ended June 30th, 2026, estimated to be $26.3 million in cash. If we look at 27, so again, 26.3 is the beginning balance for fiscal 27. The district did receive its first quarterly state aid payment in July, so that sort of met the cash flow needs for July and into August. But September and March, those months right before we get the property tax payments, that's a significant portion of the general fund budget, those continue to be the cash flow constrained months in that monthly cash flow. September is projected to have a cash balance of 12.2. The big asterisk on that number is we're assuming that SAVE has sufficient cash on hand to pay $7.8 million back to the general fund. With the new Senate File 2472 reductions, TBD, we should be getting literally in the next week the new statewide average estimates. We'll see what that is. I'll have an update bit on SAVE specifically after we get those estimates from the Department of Revenue, but based on a 25% reduction, or the reduction that we think might have in the worst case scenario, we may not have $7.8 million to pay back, so more to come on that. And then the tightest cash flow for fiscal 27 is in March, and that assumes $3.5 million is the cash. That's clearly not enough to make payroll in March and meet the needs until the April property tax collection. There are still a couple of unknowns. The 24 audit showed that the general fund owed SAVE $4 million, and that PEPL, general fund owed PEPL $3 million. So there were some interfund loans that are still being reconciled. The 25 audit is still in process, so depending on where the due tos and the due froms end in 25, that may also reduce that $7 million coming in, which actually would help SAVE if it turns out to be less, but will also further diminish the general fund cash reserves if those due to due froms prove to be more accurate, or I guess greater in fiscal 25. I am making a note, SAVE cash flow, especially with the new reductions in the per pupil funding, SAVE is going to just be constrained. It's going to be very constrained, probably for the next 2 fiscal years. And so we'll just, that is. And so again, put a pin on SAVE. I will provide an update as soon as we get the new statewide average per pupil funding estimates from Department of Revenue within the next week. This is the fiscal 27 monthly general fund cash flow. Let's see, so we start June, where's my cursor? June 1st, 2026, $26.3 million. A couple notes, this is assuming that SAVE is paying the $7,759,200. That includes interest on the interfund loan from SAVE. This assumes that general fund is paying the insurance fund back, $10,600,000. There was a question. This is a larger amount than the original estimate in April because we did not pay it back in June. That does account for the additional months of interest between June and September, roughly $200,000 to be owed depending on the day that that's paid. This does assume that we're going to do another interfund loan to SAVE, TBD on whether, I think SAVE should have enough cash to pay for its December 1st interest payments. It's the June principal and interest payments that we're most worried about, but I put it in there just sort of as a worst case in case we needed it for December. And a worst case would be a full $6 million that SAVE might need by the end of the fiscal year. But as we look at the rest of the year, this is a quarterly state aid, that was the actual payment received, 26.99 million. That really helped get us through the summer months, but again, September, you'll notice, and I just wanted to point this out, because we're getting those large quarterly state aid payments and we get 2 large property tax payments a year, it is going to be normal to have a couple of big months and then deficits over time to spend those down, just because of the nature of how the money flows through the general fund. And again, March is the low point in the cash flow, $3.5 million, very slim. But again, and then 26 million comes in for state aid and property tax, 34 million. So March and October are big dollars that come in, but the month before may be pretty thin. And so that's really sort of what's coloring our recommendation for that short-term borrowing. Again, there was also a question, payroll and benefits. This is what was provided by staff based on, I think, what is known, based on actual payroll costs, teacher contracts, and the actual cost of benefits for current staff. I think one of the questions was it was larger than I think one of the April cash flows or something. And so this is, I think, what was expected based on staff in the district's cash flow. I take the payroll and benefits right from the CFO at the CFO's office. And so I will make a comment to the general public that when the district does its budget, there's a lot of unknowns at the time you do your budget, right? You don't have the teacher contracts done necessarily. You don't know the cost of benefits. Those aren't negotiated necessarily when your budgets are due in April for the following fiscal year. So I think that takes into account some of that. But I'll leave district staff to reply if there's any other comments you'd like to make. So, okay. Again, March and September really driving the recommendation for the general fund warrant. Okay. Wanted to always keep this in front of us as a reminder. We do have those interfund loans outstanding. Interfund loans to the general fund. Interfund loan to the general fund from the insurance fund, right? So $10 million will be repaid in September. That will pay that loan in full with interest. 10.6 million will be paid in September. And then interfund loans from the general fund to other funds. This is the SAVE loan, right? There's only one left in SAVE. SAVE borrowed $7,320,000, and that should be repaid back to the general fund in September. Again, that little asterisk, we're going to be working on reconciliations to find out how much, hopefully in time, how much SAVE has already given the general fund that may not be owed back. But again, and assuming that SAVE has 7.3 million. PFM estimates that SAVE will need another interfund loan to make the principal and interest payments June 1st of 27 and possibly June 1st of 28. And so the amounts I would say are in flux. SAVE is now based on actual retail sales tax that is collected, and so even the Department of Revenue provides an estimate. Those aren't actuals. It's distributed based on actual funding statewide and distributed on a per pupil basis. So we won't know the exact dollar amount to probably, I would say by March, we should probably have a good idea of what will be needed in SAVE based on year-to-date actual collections. And the full impact of the reduction and the reallocation of the funding out of the SAVE. But right now in the cash flow, PFM does have a May of 27 and a May of 28 interfund loan from the general fund to SAVE to help make sure we get all of the debt service paid. Okay, I just went through that blazing fast. So any questions? I'll just take a pause before we get to the loans. Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne, and I'm really glad you got here and safe. And first off, this is, again, nitpicky. I think you have a typo there. It should be May 2020. Okay.
Yes, I caught that in my notes. I was like, oh,
Very
no.
good.
Yes, it should say May of 28 right here. That should say May of 28 for June 1st, 28. I caught that in the car on the way here, too, so I was reviewing.
How concerned are you that SAVE won't be able to repay the general fund?
I really want to see the Department of Revenue's per pupil estimate because it's going to take into account that first reduction, and then I want to. And honestly, I mean, I'm 70-30 optimistic, I guess, maybe 60-40. I'm not 50-50, but and I also want to. I don't think I've seen the reports for what was actually received in July, so I don't know. I haven't checked the cash balances in SAVE like I did general fund. So that's why I'm not I don't know if, our CFO has any thoughts, Pat, I don't know. Are you 50? Okay, Pat's gonna look it up. Because I haven't checked to see where we were for the last quarter of collections, and Department of Revenue has not published on their website, so Pat can probably tell us where we are for cash. Roughly, I don't know that I have it with me. I wanna say you get roughly 1.5 a month? 1.1 million-ish? 1.5 to 2? Okay, so 1.5 to 2 per month. So, depending on the reduction, and the per pupil funding estimates for total retail sales, that's what it really is all gonna boil down to. It's close. I think that, 7.9, I don't know, 6 million for sure, probably. So, all of it, as much as we can, I don't know.
And will you know that before we vote to approve the warrant? Will you know those numbers or not?
Well, it is the 11th. The Department of Revenue is required to send us the new estimates per pupils by August 15th. So we have 4 more days. And we'll need to meet, probably not, not exact anyway.
Okay.
I'll have updated estimates. I'll update the save cash flow and get it. I can do that tomorrow and get that out to everybody, but we probably won't know for sure.
Okay, all right, thanks.
We're cutting it that close, unfortunately.
Yeah. Is the 8 million, is that more about, is that an insurance policy to cover if save, or is that the amount of money that we think that a bank would loan us? I guess I'm wondering, where did you come up with the $8 million figure?
Well, I guess I haven't talked to the bank directly yet, waiting for board approval. I know we've had some initial conversations, don't know that we have a credit limit. I think 8 million seems like the right number based on cash flows, and obviously, that's kind of where I think it's stemming from. There aren't a lot of funds to borrow from right now. That's the other problem, and so I think that's another reason the bank loan makes the most sense. But yeah, I think that if the 7.8 doesn't come back, 8 million covers it.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne.
Yep.
Suzanne, is the save per pupil funding based off of our certified enrollment from the last year? So this
Yes.
year's is the 25-26 school year?
Yes, October 25 is what's paid in fiscal 26-27.
So if we see a decrease in enrollment again this year, that will negatively impact our save revenues for the May 2028 payment. So we may have to pay more in May of 2028 if we see another decline in enrollment.
Correct.
So
And
we have to pay attention
I think we
to
do
that.
have declining enrollment in the cash flow. Like I said, I didn't bring my save stuff. I didn't grab my whole big file, so I apologize, but
Pat's
wanna
nodding
say
her
we
head. Yes, okay. Or Kurt's nodding his head.
I know we have a reduction. I just don't remember if it was 150. I don't remember what.
I was thinking it was like 70 students a year that we
70,
were
50?
projecting down, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
It's in line with what we've kind of seen the past few years.
It's based on the last demographer's report, so it did have actual reductions, which is why I don't think I remember the number, because it's actual changes year over year in the demographer's report that we did the change in enrollment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just had a question about the cost of borrowing, if that's the direction that we go. What is the ballpark that you anticipate?
Yes, and there was a question about that. There were some emails and questions, so I did make a little table that I provided to staff. The thing that will be different about this type of borrowing is it's not gonna be for like 12 months, right? It's gonna be a short-term borrowing, and so we're gonna set this up in a way where if you needed $1 million, you could pay it back in 30 days, right? It's really the March payroll, and then you could pay it back in April with the large receipts, right? So it'd be truly short-term borrowing. It's roughly $5,000 per million is the interest cost per 30 days. So if you borrow, I gave an example, if you borrowed $4 million in September and paid it back within 30 days, and then borrowed $8 million in March and paid it back in April, that would be roughly $60,000 in total interest costs, plus the cost of issuance for legal fees and that.
And to compare, then, if instead we were to put together some kind of interfund loans, there would be repayment with interest required there too.
Correct.
How would that cost compare with this cost you just described?
honestly, I'm not sure what Allers fee might, I don't know what their hours, they're gonna prepare a resolution for you regardless, whether it's an interfund loan resolution, there'll be legal fees, a loan agreement with the bank, there probably would be a few more, it'd be more hours of negotiating a loan agreement with the bank, but still be legal fees either way. It just, and there would be interest due either way, so probably a nominal difference. The interfund loans, those we typically, and historically have not repaid them within 30 days, right? So that's why you have the longer period. It was a large $10 million loan, that was different. Hopefully these will be short-term and not needed, but that's why we're trying to set it up as a draw this time. We draw it, pay it back, draw it, pay it back, but it is literally extra liquidity. For 30 days, it would cost $40,000 to do the full $8 million, which seems like a very low-cost security blanket to really sort of get through the next 12 months, look at the structure, do all the big changes that need to be, right, that are coming down the line later, to just buy time, kind of. That's how I look at it. And that flexibility, I know, gives your CFO a peace of mind to be able to meet all the obligations.
And can you also walk us through, like, the decision-making that has to happen in order to, let's say we do have the warrant and you have those funds available, and then, like, can you just walk us through that process of deciding what to do?
Yeah, that, and I have a few more slides, so that's okay.
I meant like let's say we've decided to go ahead
Okay.
and
Actual.
do the warrant,
Okay.
and then so you have you have access to those funds if they're needed, and then, like, what's the decision-making process for, like, oh yeah, we need to draw on that?
I would assume, I guess I'm looking at Pat, I would assume that Pat just draws on it and then repays it.
So it's
Would
pretty cut and dry, like,
Yeah.
it's like not a lot of gray in that decision.
I would be checking with people before I did that, just so you know.
Yeah.
Before doing a draw.
Right.
Obviously checking
Right.
lots of different levels before I just do that. But yes, it would be a cash flow analysis, looking at where's their payroll at for the month, where's their AP gonna come in at, oh, we're right here. And that would be a conversation on many levels before I would actually pull that trigger, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any other questions before I go on and just kind of talk through procedural stuff? Okay. I kind of already talked about a lot of this stuff, but this, to do an $8 million draw for 30 days to cost $40 million of interest, and it's set up for the rest of the fiscal year. So it can be drawn on with one cost of issuance. It's there as needed, can be drawn and repaid as many times as necessary throughout the fiscal year. We would negotiate, I would assume we would just do it for one fiscal year. We haven't got to the terms yet, but so in my opinion, this is a low-cost option to provide the maximum cash flow flexibility and stabilize liquidity for the district. It eliminates the need to rely on interfund loans. There also are very few loans that have cash flow, I would say, that are truly available to go without, right, during the school year as well. In terms of offering recommendations, again, do the drawdown tax, is the taxable borrowing because it's operating, it's not tax exempt because this isn't related to capital. But it would be a taxable interest rate, and it would be a draw and payback, a draw and payback. So truly a function as a short-term loan versus a long-term loan. Issued with a local bank, there would be no interest accruing on it there unless there's something borrowed, right? So the issuance cost would include attorney fees to set it up, and then the cost once it's actually been drawn upon. And allows for repayment immediately during those higher cash flow months. Proceeding with the draw-based taxable anticipatory warrant now provides maximum flexibility and hedges against those remaining unknowns while we're just finishing the fiscal 25 and then getting to the fiscal 26. Yeah, all the work that's being done there. So any questions on that?
I just want to go over the repayment process in doing this. As I understand it, the notion is that those months which have a higher revenue from the various sources, some of that revenue could be used to make payments on a relatively smaller draw on the principal. Is that about correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess I would ask, that still means that we as a over a long-term period, we will still have to make some budget adjustments because we're still using funds for repaying loan amounts that instead of paying our other expenses.
That's true.
Okay. So this gives us a challenge as we go ahead, but it's a challenge we could address. Okay, thanks.
I consider this sort of a bridge between some of the decisions that will be coming to sort of shore up the general fund, number of buildings, all those sort of discussions. This is sort of the bridge to get the liquidity we need until the expenditures are really sort of right-sized for where we are today with revenues. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Now that you bring up the expenditures, it seems like a good time to ask, what was responsible for that variance, the $5.6 million variance in expenditures? And
Yeah, I know $1 million of that was payroll overall that was down. How I could answer the other 4.6, I don't know that I could categorize it specifically to, it was this, it was this, it was this, it was this, because payroll was the thing we were tracking closest, but that was $1 million of that was payroll that
Okay.
we were projecting that didn't come through.
I
So,
was just curious about what we did, you know.
yeah, I know,
was
I
right.
mean, buildings made sacrifices.
Right, yeah.
Over the
yeah.
course of the end of the year and maybe held off on purchases, and we made curriculum purchases that maybe we didn't make, so.
I guess I shouldn't say right, but that was very difficult, right? I think it would be instructive for us to kind of, if you could break that down and get that to the board sometime in an email.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
And Suzanne, as long as the 8 million, whatever we draw down on and then pay back, that ceiling of 8 million would continue to be available for the fiscal year?
Yes.
No
and-
matter how many times we draw
Yes.
payback, okay.
Yes, the maturity date would be fixed when we approve the authorizing resolution, and those are terms to be negotiated with the local bank. Okay, good questions. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. Next steps, and so fast and furious for the timeline, in case we need this for September, so I apologize to be fast and furious again here. If the board gives direction to PFM tonight, to PFM, who will then call Allers immediately. I've let them know this may be coming, so they're aware, but they're waiting for your direction. I'm waiting for your direction. The next, if you were to say yes, please proceed. The no later than October 25th is the deadline to negotiate the final terms with the local bank and for the loan agreement. September 3rd or 4th would be a special board meeting. We could do it electronically if necessary to authorize issuance proceedings, and this would allow a closing date of September 11th to close that prior to September 15th payroll. Should the board choose not to proceed, an interfund loan would be needed, could be needed, I would say, to fund September 15th payroll. Staff has indicated health insurance fund that you're paying back. If you needed to borrow again, that's an option. There is also some cash in the nutrition fund. Again, this would be a short-term borrowing until the property tax and the state aid come in October, but those are the two funds that have cash that could be borrowed from should an interfund loan be decided by the board as the best option. Similar deadlines for an interfund loan option. No later than August 25th, Allers would need all of the interfund loan details for the resolution, and it would be at the regular meeting on September 8th that the board approves the resolution for the new interfund loan, or loans if it's multiple funds. And then as soon as the board authorizes interfund loan, funds would be available the following day to be drawn upon should an interfund loan be needed. So that is all I have before you. Any more thoughts, discussion? I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
I don't know if it's a question for you, thank you for the presentation, or for the team, but you
you refer to the warrant as a bridge for this year, which I think is a really nice way of conceptualizing it. Do we have an estimate yet of how much we need to seriously look at cutting from the general fund so that we don't need the bridge in the following year?
Yeah, I think I would say our Pat and I work together, and I think we're still probably stating about the same amount as we did last year. I wouldn't say we've seen anything that would say we need to change that approach. I think kind of and we'll have some discussion on this later tonight. I think once we see the October certified enrollment, that will help say yay or nay, because that can be a big swing overall. And so I really think that discussion will pick up probably around that time, that we can say, okay, we were up 200 students, and so that equates to, we don't have to pull back as much. But I think that's probably the next milestone that would significantly change
So we're going to
it.
be up 200 students, Kurt?
You just throw it in the atmosphere and it comes out.
So October we'll have a better sense, or maybe November.
I think that at that point in time, I'd feel comfortable refining where we're at overall to say, okay, so we know what FY '28, we can show projections that have a 0% SSA, a 2% SSA. I don't know that anything beyond 2% is likely a realistic projection to make any decisions off of, but we can show both of those scenarios and then come back and say, okay, so that means this. And to a point earlier, hopefully FY '28 is maybe one of those first years where we have that opportunity to set a reserve target. And so we can say, okay, we want to spend, 97% of our revenues, because we are going to work to build back a fund balance. And so I think FY '28 is probably that first year where we can hopefully have that discussion going forward.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so I just pulled up the fiscal 27 general fund cash flow again, and want to point out that you're starting with 26.3 million and ending with 17.1 million. So that's $9.2 million of cash reduction over the year. And so the 8 million fills that gap, also covers the gap should we not get that 8 million from SAVE. And so that's sort of what I think is informing that number a little bit. But, just putting this back up here, that's not the trend we want to see moving forward.
Thanks for the presentation tonight. Just something for the team and you perhaps going forward, these type of recommendations, presentations, can we make sure, I know we finally got our Financial Oversight Committee up and running, that it goes to them since they're supposed to be helping with some of the recommendations. And I know this is a quick turnaround, so this was a little bit of the exception.
Okay, you bet. Happy to do that.
President Malone, I'm also thinking that, this is a good discussion about money, not necessarily a discussion about money and education. So as we go forward, reducing our expenditures by $8 million can have an effect upon the educational offerings we're making available to all students in the district. We may not be able to avoid that a lot, but I certainly think it would be great for us to recognize it and to say what we can do about ameliorating that effect.
I was just going to share, can the board give us some direction? There's two proposals in front. Thank you.
Yep. So, go ahead.
So this is a dumb question. Is 8 million enough? I mean, what's the reason not to go with 10 million?
Looking at Pat, do we think, I think we're trying to keep it as low as we can and then close to reality.
Because of fees and whatnot, yeah.
One of the conceptual frameworks I've thought of when thinking about it is $8 million is about half a payroll.
Okay.
And so if you think, we probably don't want to be off on anything by a half a payroll, right? And so, if we're going to go for a full payroll, it'd be 16 million, right? And so that's kind of just a conceptual, does this make sense? amount that I think we can be comfortable with.
I guess I would be in favor of the warrant as opposed to more interfund loans, just because it seems like a more consistent way to meet our financial needs. Borrow, pay it back, and not try to be transferring money in between funds, but.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of the warrant. And then I would assume, Molly, and then correct me if I'm wrong, and Kurt, but if we get into a situation where the 8 million wasn't enough, if something catastrophic happened, then we still have the interfund loan solution to deploy as well, which I think is a quicker, I think we have more flexibility with timing on an interfund loan than necessarily the warrant.
And if for some reason we aren't able to get the $8 million, then I guess we would go with option 2, the interfund loans. But I appreciate your recommendations, and I think that that's a cleaner way to go, and it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in favor with following the recommendation of the warrant.
As am I.
And myself too.
There you have it.
All right. All right, well, thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thank you. Next up is we need to determine who our delegate will be at the ISB Delegate Assembly. And that is the day before the actual board con, Wednesday, November 18th. Starts at 9 and it should end at noon. It only runs over when I'm the delegate, so it shouldn't run over. If somebody else, well, and I can't be the delegate this year, so.
I'm going to be there for a meeting in the afternoon anyway. I would be happy to do that if it would be helpful.
That'd be great.
That's easy. Thank you, Director Horn Fraser.
Sure.
Next up is our legislative priorities. Directors should remember that at our last meeting, we chose several of them to pick from. The responses are listed, and it looks as though preschool, mental health, supplemental state aid, and student achievement all came out as the top 4 that Secretary Coven will be submitting. And we also need to submit our UEN legislative platform. And typically we just mirror what we selected for ISB. So just checking in to see if folks are still comfortable with that.
I am, certainly.
Okay. Yep. All right. Secretary Coven, you have what you need?
I do, thank you.
Great. That takes us to our last presentation, the demographer study and enrollment projections.
Yeah, I don't have any specific slides or anything else prepared. I kind of outlined everything in the memo. Did anybody have any questions or discussion as far as moving forward?
I'm a little concerned about the timeline. And
As were we.
And that it's not quick enough. Because what we just heard is we're looking at 8 million of cuts, and I think this study is really going to guide us in some, not necessarily all, but to me, a significant majority.
Yep.
And, you know, when I think about, I still think we're going to have to consider closing a school or schools. And when I think back most recently, when we did that with Hills, we discussed it starting in February. You know, we had a plan in February, we discussed it and voted, I think, in March. And I'm not sure this timeline would allow us to do that. I think the boundary discussion seemed to suggest that the boundaries would be finalized in June. I don't know how we have families going into the school year in June not knowing what school their child would go to. I think it's going to put us in a really tough position, which means we can't cut the money that we need to from the budget. But to me, my personal view is the only thing we should be doing this year before we consider anything else is getting our budget under control.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm worried about it. And
Yeah.
can they accelerate it?
So we had a meeting with them to express pretty much that exact concern of, you know, we felt like we had a pretty rigid timeline that we needed to hit. And they understood our concern and indicated that they could begin some processes and planning that would expedite, but we would have to maybe make sacrifices on some of the data. So like one of the things the RFP called out was just kind of a report on ESA students and where they live and where like, is that critical to doing what we ultimately need to do? Maybe not, but it would have been nice information to have overall. And so I think from our understanding and discussions with them, if we were willing to maybe loosen some of the things we were looking for within the enrollment report, they could give some fast tracking, if you will. They had also indicated to us that count day was a very big day and they were hesitant to do a lot before October. And I explained to them, we have a very robust data team that kind of tracks that all along. I mean, that's how Director Proctor back here has been helping with elementary enrollments and things of that nature. So like I said, count day for us isn't necessarily a surprise like it is for some districts. Like we're tracking that very closely all along. And so I didn't feel the need to hold on to that date as a starting point necessarily. And with our data team also, they indicated he used an example of another district that I won't name, but it took them 4 months to get the student geocode data out of that district to a format they could work with. I said, well, I don't have that concern with our team because this is a common thing that we do in terms of providing these data to either vendors or other education partners. So what I think it's kind of listed in the memo, like, we won't sign a contract that has a timeline that we're not acceptable with. And that would be kind of the next step, that we would then bring a contract to you that outlines what a realistic timeline and deliverable is. This was just their response to our RFP. And so there's kind of a slight negotiation process that happens from now to the next step. And I agree with Director Williams' sentiment that was the first thing when I was flipping through it. I was like, February is not going to work for what we need it to be. And so they are very skilled. They're working with pretty much almost all the UEN schools across the state. And so they're very well respected and have very good outcomes with the district they work in. However, maybe some of the things we asked for and some of their assumptions of what we thought our timeline would be just didn't line up.
And then my next question is the boundary analysis and facilitated boundary process is listed as additional services. And I know that there's been some discussion about doing those, doing it in sequence or doing it together. My concern with doing it in sequence is we don't have time, but I didn't know what you and the team thought about the best approach there. Or if we need a boundary analysis from RSP.
I think we probably do need a boundary analysis. Just the example I think of off the top of my head is Penn Elementary, right, is extremely full based on its boundary, and there are other schools that neighbor it that maybe aren't as full, and so we could make adjustments there. That might be one of our only examples of the importance of boundary analysis, but then to some of the points of if we are going to look at reconfiguring any of our facilities, a boundary analysis has to be a part of that, because in all likelihood, one school can't just absorb a whole other attendance area. And so there'd have to be some of that analysis. So
Do we have the capacity to do that in-house, or do we have to go and get that outsourced?
in terms of the boundary analysis, I think we could do it in-house. Would I feel confident that we could get maybe down to the detail that a demographer might get to? I would have concerns.
Okay. Then I think my preference would be to outsource the boundary analysis and do it in connection with the rest of the work.
Sure. So
Just mine, but yeah.
I'll ask at the end of the discussion.
And I agree with Director Williams on that. And I also agree that in terms of communicating and messaging to the community and transparency, I think it's important for us to call it what it is. You know, so if this is what we're going to be asking of this a company, then we should just
do it.
make sure. Yeah, let's just do it and make sure that the community knows that this is what we're doing.
Sure.
Agreed.
And to that point, I see that the options to facilitate community meetings is in there too, as also presented kind of as additional services that I think that in our circumstances, it's going to be really important to be very thoughtful and transparent and communicate well. And so I would be in favor of having support for that part of the process as well.
So, if I'm understanding the takeaway correctly, we are interested in a contract that includes what I'd call facility reconfiguration, boundary analysis, kind of mixed in with that as well. So we can ask them for a contract that combines both of those and creates a schedule that gets us to a February target. Is that an accurate statement? Perfect. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. That takes us to our action items for tonight. The first one is policy 503.01, student conduct. And just a reminder, these will probably come back before us again since they will be on policy and governance agenda later this month. So is there a motion?
I move to approve policy 503.01, student conduct.
Second.
Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is policy 503.11, disruptive behavior. Is there a motion?
Move to approve policy 503.11.
Second.
Secretary Coven, ready for a vote?
Online voting is open. Director Eastham, yours did not come through.
I voted yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is policy 503.11R1, disruptive behavior regulation. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve policy 503.11R1.
Second.
Secretary Coven, ready for a vote? And my screen is frozen.
Mine is too.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a roll call, if that's okay.
Okay.
Abraham.
Yes.
Eastham.
Yes.
Finch.
Yes.
Horn Fraser.
Yes.
Malone.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is policy 503.11R2, disruptive behavior regulations for students with IEP. Is there a motion?
I move to approve policy 503.11R2.
Second.
Secretary Coven, ready for a vote?
Abraham.
Yes.
Eastham.
Yes.
Finch.
Yes.
Horn Fraser.
Yep.
Malone.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is policy 603.03, special education. Is there a motion?
I move to approve policy 603.03.
Second.
Secretary Cohen, ready for a vote?
Abraham.
Yes.
Eastham.
Yes.
Finch.
Yes.
Horn Fraser.
Yep.
Malone.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And the last action item is for the selection of vendor for demographer study and enrollment projections. Is there a motion?
I move approval of RSP and Associates to perform a demographic study and enrollment projections.
Second.
I don't know
Thank you. Secretary Coven, ready for a vote?
Just like that, we're back up. Let's see. Online voting is open.
I'm a yes.
Thank you, Director Malone. Vice President Abraham. Callahan, yours did not come through.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to our upcoming events and community updates. First up is director liaison reports. Are there any items that directors would like to highlight?
President Malone, I'd just like to make a comment that I attended the Black Voices Project monthly meeting last night, August 10th, along with Director Horn Fraser. And there was an extensive and I think very fruitful discussion at among the group about Senate File 2865, which leads me to believe that the Black Voices Project group and individuals will be interested in working with us and in responding to data that we generate for our own use and the public's view as we implement that statewide legislation in this particular district in a way that benefits students and staff.
Thank you, Director Eastham. Is there anything else directors would like to highlight? Hearing none, it takes us to our agenda setting. Just want to make a note, it's not listed, but we have our board retreat on August 19th. We will start at 4:30. And in addition to our regular meeting on 8/25, there will be a policy and governance meeting starting at 5, I believe. And it will go over policy primers, which will include some of the policies we approved tonight, as well as the 100 series. And some items from the parking lot, Interim Superintendent Courtmeyer.
So what we don't have listed that I shared with the board that we'd bring back next time is a presentation by our Executive Director of Elementary and Secondary around the tech committee and a proposal for what that committee looks like this year and get some feedback from the board. We also will be bringing back a demographer contract based on our discussion tonight.
And I know there was a item out there from last meeting from Director Finch about the list of positions that were cut and the savings. Do you know when that might circle back?
We will try to get that ready for August 25th as well.
Okay. And we will need to most likely put out a RFP for a search firm for our superintendent search, because that time that people start looking for those positions are quickly coming up. So is that a possibility, maybe to have some options by the 25th? I see Kurt saying yes. Kurt's saying yes to everything tonight. I'm sorry.
200 new students?
Yeah.
Yes to this,
Just
yes to this.
To clarify, are you wanting an RFP to review, or are you wanting to just discuss the firms that it could be brought? You know what I mean? Like, are you wanting to, what are you looking for exactly?
I think we want an RFP, or do you, I don't know, board, do you want to talk about the different firms, or do you want an actual RFP? I want to.
To me, it's easier to talk about to have a draft RFP and then talk about what it's missing or what doesn't need, like to have a starting point. It's easier to have something.
That's
But
fine.
that seems aggressive in 2 weeks, but if you can do that, great.
It's fine.
Okay.
I also had a question, just so I know that we have those RFPs out for the organizational analysis and so on. Any takers?
We had 7 responses on the organizational review.
Great.
And they're kind of lengthy in their response, so they're taking a little while to get through to review adequately. The comp and benefits one, there was only 3 that responded. That one we might get turned around a little more quick, just because the scope of that one was a little more narrowly defined and the responses weren't as long. My goal would be, ideally I'd like to have both of those back by that next August meeting, but it may only just be one.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from directors? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.